Ooh, and no, the title is not clickbait, so keep watching, all will be revealed. Ah, yes, welcome. And for those of you wondering, spoon you, mischievous utensil you, why did you pick this title? Because it's contentious and thought-provoking. And I happen to be a bit of a pretentious bastard at times, but anyway. One of my subs messaged me a couple of weeks ago, and they asked me, so I was watching the Vice stream with you and Aiden when I got to the point about the women's liberation movement, since they were basically celebrating abortion. I simply asked to myself, what is so liberating about having random dudes blow their load inside of you? I read that and thought, that's a good question, and given that it's obviously not a good thing, and aside from the obvious by now damage of the sexual revolution, I think you can make the case it wasn't women that was liberated by the sexual revolution, I think it was more men. And here is why. If you look at the dynamics of sex and its sort of cultural characteristics, women think they hold the power to sex. Now, personally, I don't think this is necessarily true. No, women think they control the access to sex due to the biological nature of the act, and they assume this is what bestows upon them said power. But the act itself is still reciprocal. That power is contingent on the male being willing to engage with it. And they mainly do because men are weak in the face of temptation. Primarily, I think because masculinity is so demonized in today's society, men massively undervalue themselves and will sleep with damn near anything, and women, conversely, grossly overestimate their worth. As the saying goes, with great power comes great responsibility. If you're a woman and you rack up a body count like Clinton's kill list, that shows men you do not value that power. You can't wield it with any sense of responsibility or grace. That instinctively generates a feeling of disgust, whether men will admit this or not. Here's the tricky truth. Men are not demonized for a high body count because women are seen as the keepers of sex. Men do not degrade other men for a high body count, and neither do women degrade men for that matter. But women will absolutely demean other women for it, and men will qualify you as cheap and degraded for your past. It's the classic key and lock saying. What you've essentially done is tuned your body from function to pleasure, and you've turned your genitals into a sort of drug lab to chase this ephemeral ecstasy. But much like actual drugs, it will leave you scarred and damaged. No one wants to wed the village whore. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news here. A man's job is to work hard, provide. Woman's job, offspring, nurturing. You all know the shtick by now. Because some things don't change, and I will repeat that message that sticks in people's noodles. Now, to the contentious title that is this video. And as I said before, to the people that get to a certain point in the video and then spaz, hold your trigger fingers away from the keyboard and keep your pants on. Obviously, I'm not against freedom and liberty as concepts. However, as I've said previously, the left's assault on language, and frankly their own brain cells at this point, seems to have caused some devolution, and the words like fascism and racism have been hollowed out of any meaning and they're just loaded to the gills with emotion. Those who are susceptible to those words simply react to them as if they're mere noises emanating from a human's face and respond accordingly in a negative kind of manner. The right has a similar, if somewhat muted version of this with regards to freedom and liberty. Obviously, these words are not absolutes, they are more nuanced. However, considering the mass communication mechanisms of our civilization are digital, not to mention its democratization as well as the business model that thrives when it's running on impetus, it does create a toxic environment more driven to supply dopamine to the user via snarky posts that fan the flames of tribalism rather than providing a place for civilized discourse, and it all rides a roller coaster to hell. Not to mention, prolonged engagement with these technologies makes one depressed and I'd imagine rather short-tempered. Thomas Sowell has this really good line, there's no such thing as solutions, what you have are trade-offs. You can apply that to freedom. Are we free to kill each other? Well, technically yes, but the trade-off is a prison cell, so not exactly a good trade-off there, and so we don't. Or take the saying the difference between poison and medicine is in the dose. You can apply that concept to freedom, or its verbal form, liberation. Freedom in medicine form is liberation. Freedom in poison form is chaos. The problem is, what some people consider in need of liberation, other people consider safety or security or structure. Bit of a silly example this one, but it does get the point across. Say you had a football field, 100 meters in length. Why 100? Remove that. Okay, why? How far apart are the goalposts then? I'll get rid of those as well, that's a restriction too. Okay, so it's just a ball in a field, with no goal, literally. So your efforts of liberation turn to poison and you've removed the functioning structure. Or flip it in reverse, the construction of a home provides security and safety. Other people's freedom to enter it are prohibited to ensure the safety and security of the occupants. Now throw in that dreaded thing called politics into the mix and you get a whole mess of bollocks, and you'll soon realize the two opposing sides don't even agree on the foundations anymore, and there's no middle ground, and so there is no reconciliation, there is no compromise. You'll have a bunch of evil assholes on the one side who think they should be free to indoctrinate the youth, and then there are those who oppose them because they correctly assess those creatures to be demonic. They want special groups to be addressed in a manner that is absolutely antithetical to objective reality. Should they get even an inch of a win, they will do everything they can to erect new laws and structures to securely continue their radical agenda under the guise of freedom and equality. This is what the left does really well and what the right sucks ass at, because the right has no teeth to fight for absolutism whatsoever. There's an old American Presbyterian preacher who spoke of this in the mid-1800s, by the way, Robert Louis Dabney, that the progressives have no principles other than accruing more power under the guise of said freedom and equality, and the right will just growl for a time and then capitulate. They're not the enemies of progressivism, they are merely in fact its shadow. Never do they dismantle its advances, they in fact acquiesce to them and then claim it's a principle of conservatism after a certain amount of time. We could see this in the UK even, when you have idiots like David Cameron claiming he can defend same-sex marriage as a conservative, which is a bigger joke than his time as a prime minister. And the reason we have this crap is because of democracy. Because taking a hard stance and revving a culture war is seen as political suicide. Because the stupid media then will pump the plebs full of mindless sloganeering propaganda, claiming this is the mindset of backwards reactionaries hell-bent on taking away our hard-fought freedom. Shut the hell up. Just because you fought for something does not mean your cause is righteous. And so now we're stuck in this tug of war with this balance of restrictions and freedoms with no agreement on the foundations because it doesn't appear there is one. Violence will eventually result from this. But the things that I find odd are what we value in society as freedoms. And I don't mean things like freedom to defend yourself or freedom to speak your mind. Those things are natural as far as I'm concerned. I mean things like vices. Because what do we value? I want to be able to become the world's fattest man. I want to be able to drink as much as I want. I want to be able to get as high as much as I want. Smoke as much as I want. Dress however I want. Fuck with reckless abandon. Tattoo myself up to my eyeballs, and including in some cases, mutilate myself, lead a hedonistic lifestyle designed to blitz myself into sensory overload. Why? We can look at these things and come to terms with the fact that they are all objectively bad. So the question is, why do we value these vices? Is it because we value them in and of themselves, or is it because we value the freedom to be able to engage with them without the state forbidding them and using that as a means to control the population? Because I get the impression it's probably the latter. In the ideal world, which is obviously utterly unrealistic, you would have these things be present, but your society is morally oriented enough not to partake in these vices. If the state is dictating your morality, that always goes horribly wrong. America's Prohibition era proved that. Not only did it not stop people from drinking, hell, they were drinking more than they ever did before. Gangsters made a fortune bootlegging, and crime went through the roof. On the other hand, you can't have people engaging in these activities with reckless abandon constantly because your society would implode. This is why libertarianism is complete fan fiction, by the way. Because you can't have a society based purely on just freedom. It simply doesn't work. Humans are sheep. They need a shepherd or else they will wander off. What you deem as freedom simply manifests itself as defenselessness for degeneracy to set in and order degrades over time. So you need to return to some sensible medium to reharmonize this lost equilibrium, because you're constantly fighting a battle between soul-destroying tyranny versus soul-destroying decadence. And it seems to me the heavier you lean towards one side, the more you are at risk of flying off harder in the other direction. Now what that reharmonizing force is, I don't know. But I'm pretty damn sure equality has done a substantial amount of damage to it. I'm under the impression shame needs to make a serious comeback because our society is far too accepting of things these days, and we very much need to reestablish some order and standards.
I'm just getting to the point where I'm just kind of anti-freedom, I think.
Based.
You know, this is where we end up. It's like this transfery nonsense. It's like, right, maybe there's something else we need rather than just freedom.
Oh, I concur, my good sir. I fucking love this guy. And that is all for today. Thank you all for watching, and God bless you, Mr. Benjamin.